All right, we're recording now.
Okay, so this is a meeting of the Board of Zoning Adjustment. Today we have two items. But my understanding is before we start discussing those items, we're gonna swear in our newest member, Craig Hammond. So Robbie or Deshauna, I'll turn it over to you to do that.
Thank you. And Craig, I will ask you to please repeat after me the oath of office. And if you could raise your right hand so we can see it on camera, that would be the only physical request.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I, Craig Hammond,
I, Craig Hammond,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and of the state of Colorado
and of the state of Colorado
and the charter and ordinances of the city of Boulder,
and the charter and the ordinances of the city of Boulder,
and faithfully perform the duties of the office
and faithfully perform the duties of the office
of a member of the Board of Zoning Adjustment, which I am about to enter.
of a member of the Board of Zoning Adjustment, of which I am now a member.
Thank you. You are now officially sworn in as the newest member of BOZA. And just to confirm before we go back to our regular proceedings, Robbie, Craig will need to sign a document with the city clerk, correct?
Correct. And I believe Thomas and I will take care of that part
Yes.
after this meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so just to review the rules, for affirmative passage of each item, we'll need 3 votes out of the 5 of us. Any less than 3 votes and the item will not be approved. So as I said, there were two items. The first item is BOZ 2026-00001, 519 Valley View Drive. Robbie, do you want to kick off the staff presentation?
Yeah, before we do that, I just want to do a little quick round of introductions from the board members, since we do have a first-time new board member with us. Considering the items tonight, if we could just do kind of a quick round with the 4 board members and staff who are here. I don't think it should take too long, but that way we can welcome Craig properly and so he knows who we all are.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, I should have done that. I can, well, I guess, Drew, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Drew Eisenberg. I'd say I joined the board back in 2023. I lived in Boulder since 2010. And I actually went through the BOZA process, applying for a variance, and got very interested in the board. And so I joined it. Yeah, good to meet you.
Okay, Sean, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm Sean Haney. I've been on this board for a little over a year now. I started at the beginning of last year, and I've been a resident of Boulder since 2022. It's good to have you on the board.
Great. And I have lived in Boulder since 2007, and I've been on the BOZA board since I think 2022. And yeah, I joined just because I wanted to get more involved in the community, and this seemed like an interesting board, and it had an opening. So welcome to the board. And if Craig, if you wanted to just give us a tiny bit of background about how long you've lived in Boulder, et cetera, feel free.
Sounds good. Great to meet all of you. I moved to Boulder about 10 years ago, just outside of city limits there in Gunborough. And I bought a house about 3 years ago, 4 years ago now in Boulder. And so kind of excited to be a resident of the city of Boulder, even though I lived half a mile down the road just outside of the city of Boulder. And similar to you, Katie, I wanted to give back to the community. I'm excited to join you all and help out where I can.
Just curious, is your line of work at all related to like architecture or construction? I'm an engineer, so my line of work has nothing to do with BOZA.
It is not. It is not. Yeah, I'm a software engineer.
Okay.
Great.
And Jill just popped in, is getting ready, so we can let Jill get settled in. We want to kind of jump to Deshauna and Thomas and then myself. That way we don't put Jill on the spot immediately.
Okay. So, Craig, we've met briefly virtually. I'm Deshauna Sasweta, and I am your city attorney's office representative. I have been advising BOZA since April of 2025, and excited you're my second person I've sworn in this capacity. So it's been a time of change with BOZA recently, but I'm happy that we're fully staffed up and happy to have you aboard. And if you have any questions, and this is true for anyone, I'm always happy to be a resource, and feel free to reach out to me. Oh, I've lived in the county for 10 years, but I don't live in the city. So
Hey, Craig. We've also met briefly online, but I'm Thomas Remke, and I'm the board secretary for BOZA as well as for the planning board. And I've been working with the city since December of 2023. And I live in I do live in Boulder. I live in South Boulder area.
And then I will go ahead and jump in. We've met multiple times before, Craig, but I am the staff liaison to BOZA, and I've been involved with BOZA for the better part of my nearly 14 years working for the city of Boulder. So I've seen members come and go, and it's always nice to see new members come in. So welcome aboard, and this should be a good meeting for your first one. So with that, if Jill is available, we can let Jill do a little introduction before jumping into the first item.
Hi, I am sorry, guys, but I'm in Germany and it's the middle of the night. So it looks like you guys are still using my old email address. So we'll take care of that after the meeting and resolve it. I'd like to be off camera, but I don't know if we're allowed to do that or not.
And Deshauna, I'll let you kind of speak to that.
it is preferable to have all voting members on camera due to the public hearing component of the applications. And so if it's doable for your connection, that would be the request. Otherwise, I do want to point out that we have a quorum without you, Jill, if you need to step away.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I'm saying hi and welcome to the new members, and then I'll come in next meeting because there's been a communication glitch, and I apologize for my part in that, but I need to get my correct email address up there because it is the middle of the night here. And I just happened to wake up and see the text from Thomas, so I'm saying hello. Do you have a quorum without me?
Yes, we
Yes,
do.
we do.
Okay. So my preference would be to excuse myself and catch up with you next time.
And that would be totally fine. Jill, thank you for
Thank
stopping in and letting us know, and we will get this figured out for the next meeting.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Good luck this
Jill.
evening.
Thanks, Jill.
All right.
Safe travels.
Good night.
So with that, Katie, are you okay being the interim chair for the meeting? Oh, you're muted.
I said, sure, absolutely.
And I think Thomas needs to do a little preliminary presentation if you're still doing those, Thomas, before we jump into the first item.
Oh yeah, sure. Do we want to go ahead with those? rules of participation?
if you don't mind, and then we will jump into the first item, promise.
Sure. Give me just a second to pull those up. All right, so I'm just going to go over some quick rules of participation for the public hearing section of this meeting. We just want you to know that the city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations, and that this vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and board and commission members, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. And for more information about this vision and the community engagement process, you can visit our website at the link below. And the following are some examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that support this vision. These will be upheld during this meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited, and participants are required to identify themselves using the name they are commonly known by, and must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. When we get to the public participation section, if you would like to speak, you can hover your mouse over the bottom of your screen or find it on the bottom of your screen if you're using your phone, and click the raise hand icon to let us know you'd like to speak. If you happen to be calling in, which I don't believe I see anybody calling in tonight, you can press *9 on your phone to raise your hand. And if you don't happen to see that raise hand icon, you might see this reactions tab. You can click on that to expand it, and then you'll see the raise hand option from there. And that concludes our rules of decorum. So I'll pass it back to you, Chair.
Okay. Robbie, so the first, as I said earlier prematurely, the first item is BOZ 2026-00001 on Valley View Drive. And Robbie, I'll just hand it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And up on the screen, you should see the presentation. If not, just let me know, but I will go ahead and jump right into the first item. Again, this is docket number BOZ 2026-00001. The address is 519 Valley View Drive, and this is a setback variance as part of a proposal for a new detached one-car garage on the property that currently has no off-street or sheltered parking. The applicant is requesting a variance to the rear north yard along Alpine Avenue, which is considered a secondary front yard due to the property's through lot classification. This will be a variance to the rear yard setback standards for an accessory building on a through lot in the RL1 zoning district. The resulting rear north setback from the proposed detached garage will be approximately 0 feet, where 55 feet is required and no structure exists today. Section of the Land Use Code to be modified, Section 971 Boulder Revised Code 1981. And up on the screen, you see the location of the lot. I am referencing the term through lot, which is not an official term, but it's pretty much a lot that their rear yard backs up against another street. And I'll get into the history of why this variance is coming forward to BOZA in the next slide. But up on the screen, you can see the location of the 5 written correspondences in support of the variance request. It is the 3 neighbors to the east and west, directly to the east and west, and then 2 neighbors across the street, across the Valley View Drive to the south, as you can see on the map. And this property is zoned RL1. And the lot size is around 6,600 square feet, so a little below the minimum lot size for the typical RL1 zoning district. A little bit in the way of the history is the home was permitted and built circa 1942, and the subdivision in the current configuration of the quote unquote through lot was done around that time. So it has been in this configuration for quite some time. The setback issue, what is requesting the variance right now, and let me just check. What is requesting or requiring the variance was caught at building permit, and that was done through BLD ACC 2025-00106. And then BRC 972D, which is the code section that references or refers to the through lot, states that where a rear yard backs onto a street, the rear yard shall have minimum landscape setback equal to the minimum front yard landscape setback from a street for all buildings and uses. So typically, there is one 55-foot setback, front yard setback for an accessory structure. Because this property's backyard backs onto another street, so it has two frontages, that 55-foot accessory structure setback occurs twice on the property. So it's 55 feet from the front yard, which is the south property line, and then also 55 feet from the north property line, which is the rear property line. Because of this code section that states it essentially acts like a front yard landscape setback. So they have, for any detached accessory building, they are required essentially two 55-foot setbacks, one from the south and one from the north. And then I did look into some of the neighboring larger accessory structures. If you had a chance to drive around and look at that, and you probably noticed there are some miscellaneous sheds and larger buildings along Alpine Avenue, which is essentially treated like the backyard for all of these properties. I did not see any clear variances that were issued. Based on my quick search through the records, the property owner may have more on that, but may not. But all of the larger structures, especially the two properties to the west, they've been there for at least 30 years, likely longer than that. So they have been in existence for quite some time now. They are not new structures. And then I also looked at solar access, side yard wall articulation, side yard bulk plane and height. And due to the location and the dimensions of this structure, there are no issues with any of those. Again, this has already gone through a round of review, building permit review, where not just zoning, but also engineering and building have taken a look at this. And it just happens that zoning presented this as a setback issue. And that is why the applicant is in front of the board this evening. And this just gives you an idea of some of the existing site conditions on the property. You can see the Alpine Avenue to the north, and this is essentially going into the backyard. And then this just gives you a somewhat older street view, but it gives you an idea of the front of the house. And then also this is a street view, the north part of the property along Alpine Avenue. So this is where that new driveway and site access would essentially be constructed, is where these the shrubs are located. Oops. So what the board is considering this evening for the first docket number is a setback variance request, again, for a rear north setback. The request would be for approximately 0 feet, where 55 feet is required and no structure exists today. And on this visual, I showed the 55-foot front yard setback. It just happens that the property line is 110 feet long. So the 55-foot setback from both the south and the north hits right at the same point. So there really is no by right or meeting code building envelope for an accessory structure on this property, because you're required 55 feet from the south and 55 feet from the north. So there really isn't a code compliant location that somebody could put any accessory structure requiring a building permit on this property, especially in the backyard. And then this just gives you an idea of the dimensions and the height, and just earlier, the overall location. And then this gives you kind of a 3D view of what the proposed structure is going to look like. And the applicant did respond to criterion H1 and H5, and that is what staff used when evaluating and determining our recommendation. Staff is recommending is supporting and recommending approval of the first variance item on tonight's agenda. It does meet all of the pertinent criteria, and that includes H1 A through D and H5 A through D. We also received a significant amount of letters from neighbors in support of this application. And then we also feel that given the orientation of the lot, that is a through lot, it is essentially penalized with two 55-foot setbacks, that there is some undue hardship for any sort of development on this lot, especially an accessory structure. So with that, staff is in support of this variance request at 519 Valley View Drive, and we are recommending approval. So I will leave it at that and hand it back over to you, Madam Chair. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
Does anyone have any questions for Robbie?
This might not be your scope, Robbie, but on the survey, there was a planting easement on the north of the property. Do you know what that refers to?
I do not, but I don't believe it was presented as an issue from engineering, who has looked at this already through one round of review. So apologies, I don't know exactly what that is, but it didn't seem to be an issue from engineering and transportation.
Okay, just never seen that style of.
I know, it's new.
Well, if no one has any further questions for Robbie, we can move on to the applicant presentation portion. Thomas, is the applicant available to provide a presentation?
I believe so. I just promoted them, so I just gave access to Brad Birch.
Great. So Brad, whenever you're ready, you can provide your presentation.
Okay. Hi,
And-
board. Brad Birch. I am a resident of Boulder since probably.
Sorry, Brad, 1 second. Do we want to start a timer? Is that something we normally do for applicant presentations?
Typically we don't, because I believe they're given 10 to 15 minutes. So rarely do they hit that. But
Okay, sounds
if
good.
Brad thinks he can say his words in less than 10, 15 minutes, I don't think we need it for the applicant presentation.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to check. Go ahead.
Yeah, and Brad, I was just gonna say, if you could introduce yourself and just where you live and you know who you're representing.
Okay. Again, my name is Brad Birch. I am resident of Boulder since 1996. CU Buff, stayed here. I live downtown. My wife and I both work downtown, so we enjoy walking to work every day versus driving, which is a nice perk. This project is for an acquaintance of mine who has taken over the house from his parents, which have aged out of the house. They've owned the house for 30 years.
Brad,
Yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but could you please share an address for the record? You could use a business address, that's fine. That's just one of those matters that we like to put on the record when people are presenting.
sure, of course. A good address is 1301 Canyon Boulevard, suite
Thank you.
number 120. Okay, so yeah, Rob is got this house from his parents who were there 30 years. He is interested in hopefully trying to move away from fossil fuels and stuff. And so what originally started this was he has no way to charge his EV, and you know, dragging cables across the sidewalks and things was becoming a little bit difficult, and obviously neighbors weren't happy about that and everything. And then Rob's a long time Boulder resident too, so he's got the requisite bikes and things, so there was little need for storage. We base the footprint of the property off of that EV, or the garage off of that EV, which is actually fairly large. It's a Rivian truck. So that was the basis of our footprint. We started with 3 feet around all sides, and then maybe an extra 1.5 feet so we could load the truck. But other than that, seems fairly straightforward. We'd like to make sure that the new structure works with the house and the character of the neighborhood. And back to, there was one question about that easement. That's been another little thing that we've had to learn about. The property was plotted in 1941, and the plat easement, or the plat, says that the easements expired in 1967, January 1st, 1967. So we've checked that with the county, we've checked it with attorneys, we've checked it with actually the city, and that easement no longer exists. So that's what I have.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Does anybody have any questions for Brad? Hearing none. Thomas, can you tell whether has anyone from the community joined and interested in making a presentation?
Thanks, Katie. I know 2 of these names on here are with the next applicant team, but the other one I'm not sure about. So we'll just go ahead and open up the public participation opportunity for this one to members of the public. If you would like to speak to this item, please go ahead and raise your hand on Zoom, and we'll call on you and give you 3 minutes to speak. And I'm not seeing any hands coming up, so I'm not sure if we have anybody to speak to this item.
Okay. Well, if there's no community questions and no one has any questions for Brad, then I would just open up the discussion for the board. So I guess I'll just, Drew, I'll start with you. Do you have any comments or sort of, observations about the application?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess in short, I think it meets the criteria. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about why. Obviously it's a irregular lot, having, essentially 2 front yards. And additionally, the north property line is offset from the street. You wouldn't want a structure, right up against the sidewalk, but actually there is about 22 feet away from the street, and that's in line with the other neighboring houses. So it fits well within the neighborhood. So I could go through the criteria, but I would be in support of this variance. And you're muted, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you. Craig, I know you're new, but do you have any comments you want to add, or just sort of initial observations after hearing the presentations?
Yeah, I'm new, so not entirely, kind of learning a little bit about this, but from my perspective, it meets criteria as well. It's an irregular lot, kind of fits in with the neighborhood. And it's similar there to the neighbor on the west side, essentially a very similar structure there.
Okay. And Sean, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I'm inclined to approve because it does seem to meet all the criteria, specifically 1A1 and 1AB. The lot, for some reason, that particular block has both the front and backyard frontage being basically two front yards, but especially that particular block has that super wide right of way to the north of it, even though the road and curb is much farther away from the lot line. Whereas both the block east and the block west don't seem to have that. I'm not sure why that is, but I think that effectively means it meets H1A1 and H1B, and then H1C. Because of that, front yard setback in the back, it's pretty much impossible to basically do anything in that backyard, no matter where they place the garage or how big they make it, just because of that unique situation. And then it also meets H1D for the same reason. And then also it meets all five requirements of H5.
Great. Thank you, Sean, for going through those criteria. And for my part, I too agree that it seems to meet the criteria as Sean noted. And I also was persuaded just from the letters of support, I think there were at least 5 letters of support from the neighbors, and that was persuasive, as well as the arguments about, it being a rather high trafficked area when people come through there to, park nearby to go hike Mount Sanitas. And so trying to charge his car on the street seems like an unnecessary hazard. So this seems like a great solution. So I was persuaded by that as well. So I too am in support. So with that, would someone like to make a motion on this application? If I certainly can do it, but Drew, do you want to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve the BOZ. I don't know the number. 000.
4 zeros and a 1.
This is the first one.
It's
Okay.
2026 and then 4 zeros and a 1.
Okay. BOZ 2026000001. And I make a motion to approve it.
Great. Well, I second Drew's motion. So with that, let's take a vote. Craig, you want to cast your vote?
I'm in favor.
Okay. Drew,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
and I for me as well. So with that, the application is approved. And thank you, Brad, for your presentation.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Have a great day. So with that, we can move on to the second application. This is BOZ 2026-00002. And this one is on 6th Street. So Robbie, you want to go through your presentation?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this is docket BOZ 2026-00002. The address is 27706 Street, and this is also a setback variance. As part of a proposal to replace and modify the roof over an existing single-story portion of the non-standard single-family home, the applicant is requesting a variance to both the minimum interior side north and the combined side yard setbacks for a principal building in the RL1 zoning district. For the minimum setback, the resulting interior side north setback will be approximately 3.8 feet where 5 feet is required, and approximately 3.8 feet exists today. For the combined side yard setback, the resulting interior side north setback will be approximately 3.8 feet where 6.7 feet is required and approximately 3.8 feet exists today. Section of the Land Use Code to be modified, Section 971, Boulder Revised Code 1981. And up there on the screen, you see the location of the subject property at 2776th Street. And we did receive, or the applicant did receive, one letter of support from the most impacted neighbor, which is the neighbor to the north at 2800 6th Street. And this property also has an interesting easement history. We won't get too deep into it, but it is the reason why they are seeking a variance this evening. But again, there was one letter of support, and that was from the property to the north. And a little bit of zoning background. It is zoned RL1. The lot is around 6,383 square feet, which is somewhat smaller than the minimum lot size for a typical RL1 zoned property, which is 7,000 square feet. The history, the home was built circa 1954. I did a little snooping and digging and did happen to find that in 1971, a variance was brought to who was then called Bozaba. That is essentially what Boza was called before Boza was Boza. It was docket number 7127, and that was to allow, in addition to the home on the north setback, the subject property line for essentially extending the existing home along that property line. And within that variance application, there was a 10-foot city-owned easement now vacated that was referenced. And the current homeowners did purchase the property in 2015 per the application materials. I even reached out to some of my colleagues in engineering who are a little more familiar and kind of deal with easement matters, and they were having a hard time trying to find the exact history of the subject easement. But it was there. It essentially is not there today. So the house as it sits today has been in that configuration for quite some time. The existing and proposed floor area as a part of this project, there is going to be no change to the floor area. It is just a modification of the roof within a setback, which is what's requiring the variance tonight. And then same with the building coverage. There is no modification or change to the building coverage. And both of those are still to this day below the maximum allowance for the property. And same holds true for solar access, side yard wall articulation, side yard bulk plan, and height. Due to the design and the location of the project, which is essentially a roof modification and the raising of the roof, no issues have been presented at this point, and all of this will be verified at building permit when that time comes and pending the results of tonight. This gives you an idea of the existing conditions of the house. You can see there in both the survey and then also the aerial, the northeastern corner of what is out there today is what the board is considering tonight. That's where that modification, the roof modification, is going to be taking place. And then we have a street view of the property from the front along 6th Street. It looks like a one-story house from the front, but because of topography, it does go down and you essentially have what we would consider a two-story house. But the addition that the board is or the existing part of the home that the board is considering tonight and the modification of the roof is to what would otherwise just be a one-story portion of the home. And this gives you an idea of kind of what is out there today and what's proposed. You can see the referenced easement up there, and then also all of the proposed and existing setbacks. I did mention and denote that there are technically two variances that the board is considering. They do go hand in hand, but with any single family property in the RL1 zoning district, you actually have two setback requirements, side setback requirements that have to be met. The first one is the outright minimum setback. So any addition to a home or any new construction has to meet the minimum setback of 5 feet. And the number one setback element is the minimum interior side setback. That's the minimum setback requirement. And that is a request for approximately 3.8 feet, which is what is out there today, where 5 is the minimum. So 5 is the minimum setback for any side yard. And then we kind of jump to the second element, which is the combined side yard setback. And what this is saying is that total of both side yards for any new construction or addition to a house has to have a minimum combined side setback of 15 feet. So that's just a little bit extra of an element. So because the existing south setback to the home, you can see, or down is south, is around 8.3 feet. The difference of 15 and 8.3 is what the north setback would have to meet that combined setback requirement. So that is why the request is for approximately 3.8 feet to recognize what is out there today, where 6.7 feet is required. And that's the difference of 15 and 8.3. That's where we get the 6.7. So they are technically separate variances. But I know in the past the board has somewhat grouped them together because if one is approved, pretty much both are approved because they are the same request. But we did want to call those out separately because they are technically two separate setback standards that have to be met. And I can go into more detail in terms of what the combined is and the difference with minimum if the board needs me to, more than happy to. But that is why you see two setback variance requests in front of you this evening. And then these are just some drawings, proposed elevations, and you can see on the upper image, this is the side view. So from that north property line, which is the side property line, you can see the existing kind of one-story wing essentially. And that is likely the variance that was touched on back in the early 1970s. But because the roof is to be modified, that is a change of design from what was presented 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago. And because of that, a new variance would have to be granted for essentially in the lower image, that small blue triangle. It's pretty small, so I'm not sure if you can see it, but that is the portion of the new roof that is not meeting both the minimum and the combined. So that kind of blue triangle is what is requiring the variance rather than deconstructing and pushing the existing wall of the home back to where it meets that 6.7. The applicant is requesting just to seek a variance so they can do that roof modification and roof change within that setback. And then this just gives you some lower level floor plan, which is the upper left image. And then we've got the upper level floor plan, which is the lower right image, just giving the idea of the layout of the house. They're essentially wanting to fix up and bring into modern day the existing flex space for the home. And they would prefer not to tear down roughly about 3 feet of that wall to meet the setbacks. They would rather just maintain that and still do the work to the roof. So with that, staff is supporting this variance request as it has been presented and is recommending approval to the board. The applicant did respond to criterion H1 and H5, and staff used that when determining our recommendation. Because of the existing conditions, the somewhat convoluted history in terms of that easement that did likely impact the location of property lines after the house was originally constructed. And because there is neighbor support, especially from the arguably the most impacted neighbor, the neighbor to the north who did provide written support, staff does feel that this is an appropriate request, that it meets all the pertinent variance review criteria. And again, we are recommending support as it has been presented within the application materials. And with that, I will hand it back over to you, Madam Chair. But if anybody has any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
Does anyone have any questions for Robbie?
I guess just for my understanding, the easement, because in the original plotting of the house, the easement looked like it was there. There was a gap, but then it was vacated. And so who owns that land? Or I mean, what isn't an easement like saying that it's someone else's land, but you can't use it? But it looks like it's like city-owned land. So it's not an easement. Or what? What is
It's
it?
confusing. And Deshauna, you may be able to give legal talk to this if needed, but I did reach out, like I said, to my engineering friends who they're the ones who oversee the easements. They were having a difficult time, but it does appear that the land was essentially granted back to the property owners because it was originally like a city right of way, like you would see for a street. And it probably was intended to be a street at one point, which is why it kind of aligns with the whatever street is perpendicular to Sixth Street. But this was granted back, and due to legal processes, it appears that the vast majority, if not all of what was that 10-foot easement was granted to the property to the north, which is 2800 North Street. A lot of times it's split equally for some reason with this one. And of course, I'm not familiar with kind of why things are done when it comes to easement vacations, but it does appear that the majority, if not all of it, was granted to the property to the north, which is why they have a now larger kind of side setback, and this property has a smaller side setback. So, Deshauna, feel free to correct me, tell me to stop talking about easement stuff, but that it does appear that for some reason it was given back to the property owners from the city, and this is the orientation of the lots that was, I guess, agreed upon legally.
And Robbie is correct. When an easement is extinguished, unless a new easement is dedicated to a different entity or person, it automatically reverts back to the original landowner.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you.
Craig or Sean, do you guys have any questions for Robbie? Okay, hearing none. We can move on to the applicant presentation. Thomas, has someone from the applicant's side checked in for the presentation?
Yeah, they're rejoining as a panelist now. So,
Great.
and Robbie, I'm not sure if you know which member from the applicant team will be sharing the presentation.
I believe Kim will, but we have both the property owners and Kim with us, so I will let them decide who wants to speak to the board.
I'll go ahead and give them both permission.
I can jump in if I'm ready to roll here. I'm Kim. I'm with Slope Architecture, representing the homeowners here. I am a resident of unincorporated Boulder County, but my business is here in City of Boulder. So if you need an address for that, that's 3012 Sterling Circle, Suite 250, 80301.
Great, and you can just feel free to start your presentation.
Okay, yeah, I don't think I have anything graphic because Robbie already kind of used all our graphics. Just kind of reiterate some of the property has kind of existed in the same footprint for a long time. It seems like there's a lot of confusion about this kind of easement, not easement. I've gotten as many different answers as Robbie has. Talked to the surveyors and their understanding of the title work, reading it. It still seems like, as far as I can tell, nobody owns or wants to own that 10-foot swath of land. And honestly, if the property line was in the middle of that 10-foot swath, we wouldn't be here because everything would be complying with setbacks. So how we got here, we don't really know. But the house has been there in this configuration for a long time, over a couple different builds, but even the one more recent one in the 70s. The current owners would just like to be able to update the lower level of the house. The ceiling in this section of the house is only like just barely over 7.5 feet right now. So, lowering it doesn't make any sense. So they've also continued to have leakage issues because that roof was built like dead flat, and it just, no matter how many times you replace the membrane, it's going to continue to leak. So they said, if we're going to invest in this lower level, we want to make it function and be waterproof. So that led us to kind of, okay, if we want to raise that roof to get a decent slope on it and get standard kind of asphalt shingles on there, now we're realized we had this kind of variance request, but we felt like it's a pretty insignificant change to what's there. The increase in the height in that area of nonconformance is pretty minimal. Also, this is one of those lots that increasing square footage is quite difficult to pull off due to other zoning things with just the topography and everything. A second story is unlikely to be, well, at least very large on this side of the street. So I think the lower level square footage is just even more important for their family. And so getting that roof replaced so they can keep it watertight and then be able to invest and update the lower level is really kind of the key there. So.
All right, great. Does anyone have questions for Kim? Okay. Well, hearing none, we can initiate board discussion. Sean, you want to kick off any comments you have about the application?
Yeah, I can start.
I believe we should
Oh,
open up the public
yeah.
hearing opportunity for the item.
Yeah, I apologize that. Are there any community participants who wish to comment?
Actually, we don't have anybody in the meeting that is not a panelist, that is not participating in the meeting. So I think that settles that. I don't think we're going to have anybody speak. So
Okay.
back to you.
All right. So Sean, you can continue.
Yeah, thank you. I do think I would be in favor of approving this. It meets conditions of H1A1. The lot is unusually thin because of that easement, which basically means that they can't do anything to the existing structure without it being considered non-compliant. For H1B, these certainly don't exist with any other lots in the neighborhood outside of the 4 lots that have that easement going through them. So it is certainly unique to just those 4 houses in that neighborhood. And that also would apply to H1C as well. And H1D, it looks like they're building that in the most minimalist way as possible. It's not any egregious roof line. It slopes. The highest part is away from the property line. It's just a tiny little sliver that's considered non-compliant. And I think it meets all of H5 criteria as well.
Great, thank you for outlining the criteria. Craig, do you have any comments or again, I know you're new, but if you wanted to just comment on
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, I'm in favor as well, and kind of echo Sean's point. I think because of the easement, it's non-conformative, but if the easement wasn't there, or if the property line was moved over to the middle of the easement, then it would be. So I think it meets H1, A1, and then the rest there, as Sean said.
Great. Drew, do you have anything to add?
Nope. I'm also in favor, and I echo Sean's comments.
Great. Ditto. I'll keep it short. I think Sean did a good job of outlining it. So with that, it sounds like we're generally all in support. Does someone want to make a motion on this application?
I'll make a motion to pass BOZ 2026000002.
Great. Someone want to second the motion?
I second the motion.
Thank you, Sean. With that, we can take a vote. Drew, you want to go first?
Yeah, aye.
Sean?
Aye.
And Craig?
Aye.
I as well. So with that, the motion is approved. Application BOZ 2026000002 is approved. So thank you, Kim, for your presentation.
Thanks for all your time.
All right, great. Have a great day.
You too.
So with that, I guess we can move to staff business or approval of January's minutes.
Yeah, and I just wanted to raise that regarding the minutes, I noticed they were not initially in the packet. I added them in this afternoon. They're very brief. If we do want, I can pull them up and then we can review them quickly to take a vote on those. It was only Katie, Drew, and Sean at that January meeting. But if not, we can also defer them to a future meeting for approval.
I guess just show up on your screen real fast and I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah, they're pretty brief.
And there was also a formatting issue. And did I ever send the email? Did I send that?
I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, I think I forgot. On page 22 to 24 of the packet, there was it seemed like the two applications were printed on top of each other.
I noticed that as well. I think that is an Adobe issue when it gets posted online, and I kind of looked into it because they were both separately, they're both fine, but yeah, for some reason it overlaps the application. I think that has to do with the version of Adobe that either is being used, because it happened to me as well, Drew. So I think that's what that problem is an Adobe issue. But
So
it may be impactful of when we post it online, that issue is created. Maybe for some and not all.
No, I saw it too.
Okay.
I thought it was my printer at first.
Well, they'll be going in the archive as individual documents, so there shouldn't be an issue with how they appear in the records archive.
And then we will look into it before the next meeting to see if there's something we can do on our side to prevent that from happening.
And here, just quickly, is the January 13th draft minutes. We had Katie as acting chair in Jill's absence. And we had one item for review. And the discussion was pretty brief. The board agreed that the proposal meets the necessary criteria. Oh, and I took this away. And then Drew made the motion, seconded by Sean, and then the board voted 3-0 to approve the application. And then we also approved the 2 sets of minutes from August 12th and December 9th at that meeting.
All right, looks good. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for our January meeting.
I second the motion.
For all in favor?
Yeah. Aye.
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 Yeah,
I'm gonna abstain because I wasn't there.
great. Well, the minutes are approved. Robbie, do you have additional staff business that you want to discuss?
I do, but first I want to see if Deshauna has anything to update the board on before I jump into my brief update.
And I do not have anything. Thank you, Robbie.
You're welcome. So with that, the application deadline for the June 9th meeting was this week. I am still actively kind of doing formal completeness checks, but it does appear we have at least one item moving forward to the June 9th meeting. So please be prepared for that. And if there are any expected absences, please let us know as soon as possible. And we will figure out the Jill thing. So that way our chair can attend and be notified of the meeting next time. So we'll figure that out. And then I also have a little bit of homework for you guys. Don't worry, it's not hard. But we are actively preparing for the board retreat, BOZA's board retreat. We haven't done one in quite some time. I have a meeting tomorrow actually with the clerk office, city clerk office, and I am assuming they're going to touch on those and what other boards are doing. But in the meantime, and maybe before or at time of our next meeting, if the board members could just maybe think of maybe one or two things that you would be interested in staff going over in detail versus kind of what I do during the presentations themselves. If there is something that you would like for us to maybe spend a little extra time on going over or kind of explaining or anything like that, the retreat is kind of going to be the time to do that. It can be legal, it can be zoning, it can be anything that you've seen come across your desk. But I'm just going to kind of open it up to what would you guys like for staff to do? It's likely going to be just a presentation learning opportunity for everybody. So just for the June 9th meeting, if you just come with one or two ideas of what you'd like to see, and I'm sure there's going to be duplicates from different people, that'll then let us kind of cater and develop kind of the board retreat that is likely going to happen towards the end of summer, early autumn. So, but we're going to start planning it soon. So that's about it. A little bit of homework, not too bad. Just come with ideas of what you'd like for us to kind of go over with you at this retreat. And that's about it in terms of updates. I'll hand it back over to you.
Great. And that board retreat, would that be in person, sort of a half-day thing, or?
That is still open. If the board is adamant about let's do it in person, we want to see everybody and sit next to each other, we can do that. Right now, I don't have that many details, and I'm not quite sure what other boards and commissions are doing. So it could be if the board wanted it, but I don't believe it is required to be.
Great.
I could share just some information if folks are interested. The planning board does it in person for their retreats, and I believe DAB prefers in person, the design advisory board, but they offer a hybrid component.
Okay.
And by retreat, it's like an hour, a couple hours.
So BOZ's retreats are not like planning board's retreats. I can guarantee that. So with that, the last time we did a retreat, it was in person. We pretty much just tacked it onto the end of an agenda because it was a light agenda. And that's what my hope is we do this next time is, unless we have a very busy agenda with multiple items, it might be easier just to kind of do this. It's only going to be a couple hours at most. BOZ's is very laid back, not like the other boards where they spend, like council takes days. And planning board, I'm not sure how long planning boards typically is. Thomas and Deshauna might know, but BOZ's will not be that lengthy, but it's probably going to be a couple hours, which is why maybe just adding it to an agenda would be the easiest approach for everybody. But stay tuned on more details on that.
All right, great. Does anyone have any other items they want to discuss? All right, well, I guess with that, we can adjourn, right?
Yes, and again, welcome aboard, Craig. You did your first meeting. We had a few hiccups, not you, but just in general. But yeah, this is BOZA, so welcome aboard.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to meet you, Craig, and welcome. And so with that, we'll adjourn and we'll see everyone on June 9th.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.